has announced his aspiration to be president of Kenya in the election that is coming up just 8 months away. He's the former Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions, Phillip Murgor, and he joins me tonight on Monday Night News to talk about his candidature. It's good to have you with us on Monday Night News.
Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So why you? Why president? Why now?
You know, I've just watched your news. All the answers are there. Tribalism, out of control. Corruption, out of control. The general public think there is no solution to either of those problems. So you should be asking me why I didn't decide earlier.
That would be my next question. A lot of people on the poll we have are saying, well, we don't know much about him, save for your stint in public service a couple of years back.
Well, Yvonne, the space is crowded with a certain kind of politician. We watched the news tonight. The typical politician goes out, calls upon his tribe, wears traditional regalia, and then he's fought because another group of people looking for the same tribal vote think they deserve the vote a little better. Why now? I think it's time we all started looking for a candidate who represents Kenya, not their tribe.
And why do you think you represent Kenya? Why won't tribe be a factor for you?
Well, first of all, let's ask ourselves where tribe has taken this country. Tribe took us to civil war in 2007. Tribe should be a place we are trying to move away from. Look at all the messaging about the next election. One side is declaring they've already won 70+1. One side is declaring this time they will not lose. If you look at the fault lines, they're all tribally based. If we keep going along the same path, Yvonne, we're heading for disaster. Why me? I do not look at myself as representing a particular tribe.
To be fair, a lot of candidates would probably say the same thing.
No, I don't think the guy in the colobus monkey skin, if he was here today, would say the same thing. He has gone back to his village. He has told his village to support him. And then he's going to come to Nairobi and see how he can package himself as a Kenyan. I start with packaging myself as a Kenyan.
All right. Kenyan, all right. But you chose UDM party. Tell us why you chose this party. I think a lot of Kenyans would remember that this one had links to CORD not too long ago.
I started this journey almost 2 years ago, talking to people about the solution to the country's two big problems that I've told you about. And, you know, in the last few months, after I'd made up my mind I was running for president, I started looking at possible options as far as political parties are concerned. And I spoke to several political parties. I finally settled on UDM, chaired right now by General Retired John Koech. It does have some history. It has had other people involved in the party, most of who have left. Indeed, in the last general election, it was aligned to CORD. Right now, it is non-aligned. And that is one of the reasons why I have joined it. Okay. Going forward, the party will decide which role, which alignment it will take.
So is there a possibility that UDM could align with other parties?
Already it is aligned in some way, I should be honest. It is on the opposition side. Definitely on the opposition side. I can tell you here and now, it is unlikely to be at any point on the Jubilee side. I think the problem is Jubilee. But the question as to how it will align with the rest of the opposition is a matter that will unfold as the time goes along. But as of now, we're not aligned. I'm the designate presidential candidate. Not even worrying about who shall join me, except, of course, when the time comes, a running mate.
All right, but you're saying it is definitely on the opposition side?
Absolutely.
Not on the Jubilee side?
Definitely.
Okay, so some may say here and now that you are a project of the opposition or of Raila Odinga?
I'm too big to be a project. I'm too independent to be a project. For those who know me, I think my problem throughout my public and professional life is my independence. I don't conform to things that I don't consider right. I stand up for what I consider right. I don't conform to things I consider wrong, and I stand up for what I consider right. So that doesn't leave many people to work with. Many people in politics have a problem with that. They think people should go throughout their lives being taking no shape or form, just depending on the convenience of the day. But today there is a problem. The fix needs to be certain, and it must be somebody who the people can trust will keep his word.
Okay.
Or her word.
Or her word.
Yeah.
So you talk about, definitely on the opposition side, but then again, at the start of this discussion, you criticized, a member of that, Nasser, Musalia Mudavadi, as he just got sort of installed as the Luya kingpin.
I didn't install Musalia. I didn't, I'm sorry for that. I didn't criticize him as an opposition leader. I said, look at what some of them are doing.
Mm-hmm. But with specific reference to him?
Well,
I mean, that's been the latest incident.
He's on the news.
Okay.
If he wasn't on the news, I may not have mentioned him. And by the way, I did have a word with one of his handlers, and I did wonder where all this was going. And in fact, I didn't think it's the kind of message one should be sending out to Kenyans at this time.
So what do you say to people who put you in the same category as other presidential candidates who have tried before, and are known as the other? Because a lot of people say this is a two-horse race. In 2013, there was Martha Karua, Paul Mwite, James Ole Kiapi, Abdu Badida, and they were the sort of other candidates, if you like, who are not from the big parties. And they say, look, Philip, you're wasting your time. Why would you want to be involved in this? Taking a look at what's happened to the others in 2013.
There is a time for everything. Right now, Kenyans are looking at a crisis, more than ever before. And the crisis is caused by the kind of politics that we're engaged in. Mm-hmm. More than ever before, there is time for change. This is the time for change. And
carry on.
Just before you called me up,
yep.
I looked at your polls on Twitter, and 22% think I can make president, 16% are undecided, and 66% think not. At 22%, I'm not, what did you call those other guys? The other guys.
Right.
I'm not the other guys.
Well, the other guys, Martha Karua and Peter Kenneth, had quite a lot of support on social media in 2013. The number of votes did not even sort of total up to the number of followers they had on social media.
I wouldn't call what your poll is social media. I think you've just called a poll, and people are polling just like they do to Ipsos Synovate and some of the other pollsters. I'm not talking about the general discussion that goes on in social media. That's a totally different space. In fact, if you look the kind of hate talk that goes on against all candidates, I don't think that's a good indicator. But you've just called a very specific question. Would you vote for this fellow?
Okay.
And it's coming in a certain way. And I certainly don't look like those others at this point in time. And given that I announced it 3-4 weeks ago, I'm not doing badly.
Okay. Well, let's talk about this change that you propose to bring to the country. Let's talk about some specifics. Corruption has been a big issue. There's the doctor strike. What are these specifics that Kenyans can look forward to and say, this is what would be different? For example, what would one expect 100 days into your presidency should you win in August?
On which issue? The doctors or corruption?
A number of issues. You can start with corruption if you like.
Corruption? At the rate we are going, corruption will never be resolved. In February this year, a poll was conducted by PwC, and Kenya was rated the third most corrupt country in the world. That calls for serious reflection on the part of us Kenyans. We need to be looking for a candidate who is not part of the problem. On the issue of corruption in this country, there is a view held by most Kenyans, including myself, that the corruption is today out of control in the hands of Jubilee. Jubilee have turned around and said, well, the opposition are equally responsible. Look at the counties that they control. So what you have a group of Kenyans beginning to slip back into their shells and saying, why should I vote when A and B are equally corrupt? And if you ask them, what will you do? They say they won't vote. But if you ask them why, what will make them vote, they'll turn around and say, show us somebody who's a little different, who has a track record of dealing with corruption. I have that track record. On the doctors' strike, to me, it's a non-issue in the sense that it should be solved. It must be solved.
How can it be solved?
The doctors have a collective bargaining agreement. It provides that they will earn in a certain way. They should be paid. Now,
President Uhuru Kenyatta says there's limits to that. The country is broke, cannot afford the 300% pay increase in the CBA.
let's look at what Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta has been doing in the last few weeks as he's gone around campaigning all over the country. Launching projects, roads, multi-billion shilling projects. What's important, a road or the people of the country? These are your professionals. They look after our lives. How many are there in this country? Such a small number. I would, if I was the president, prioritize for the humans that form Kenya, not the roads and the bridges that form Kenya. So it's a question of priorities. I also understand that the professional categories, you know, the lawyers and the doctors and other professionals are normally paid more or less the same amounts. The doctors have fallen behind. They just need to be brought up. Somebody should be talking to them on a serious basis. Forcing them to starve into submission will not solve the problems. I could ask you, Yvonne, would you be treated by an unhappy doctor if you were very unwell? Of course you wouldn't. The one person who must be satisfied from, you know, what he takes home or she takes home is a doctor. I would have handled it totally different. I'll handle it totally different.
All right, you're talking about, you've mentioned the history of both sides of the political divide, as it were. But you also have a history, Philip. You were quite cozy with the Moi regime back in the day. And it seems like everybody has a past and was in KANU or was friendly with the KANU regime or was working for the KANU regime. Who's to say there are no skeletons that'll come tumbling out of your closet?
I like the question. Uhuru Kenyatta was in KANU. Ruto was in KANU. Raila was in KANU. Musalia Mudavadi was in KANU. Wetangula was in KANU. Kalonzo Musyoka was in KANU.
So that makes you no different from the rest of them?
No, everybody's different. In other words, anyone who was alive, working at a given point in time, had to be somewhere. I happened to be in government when it was a one-party state, and that's where I started my professional career. Cozy, politically, I have never been a member of KANU. Not at all. I have offered professional services to the retired President Daniel Arap Moi. That doesn't make me KANU. But you will also remember, I fell out with that regime. So that is the independence I have. Now, not everybody comes out different. I'm sure, Yvonne, I could look into your history and find, not you in particular, but somebody older than you in your family who was working in the government at the time. So, not a big deal.
All right, your work at the DPP's office, you feel that is enough track record for you? Many Kenyans don't know you. You've just launched your bid, you say, three weeks ago. Kenyans know very little about you, other than your stint at the DPP. Do you think you started this a little late, 8 months to it? You know, the field is marred by a lot of candidates.
I'll ask you a simple question, Yvonne. How long will it take you to be convinced by a candidate on whether or not to vote for them? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? You, personally?
Don't know. What do you think?
5 minutes? Because you're smart. You can tell between what's worth it and what's not worth it. What am I saying? 8 months is a long time, unless you have billions and you need the time to spend the billions. I don't have the billions. I have a clear message. Kenyans are smart. They can tell between what is a good choice and a bad choice.
Let's talk about the IEBC. Do you think they're prepared? You are now obviously a very direct stakeholder in this process, other than being a registered voter. But when you take a look at everything that's happening with the electoral laws, with the procurement of equipment, do you feel that the IEBC can conduct a credible, free, fair and peaceful election?
Today they are hopelessly unprepared. But there's 8 months. With enough goodwill, they can be prepared. With enough goodwill, I emphasize that. But I sense a lack of goodwill. I sense a situation where the government appears to be creating deadlocks and issues perhaps to justify a situation where they will not be prepared and perhaps eventually argue that the election date can and should be postponed. I think that will be a terrible thing to do. I think, for example, the latest law that was controversially passed by one side of the political divide, that is a disaster. That's a disaster. That's pushing the country to the brink, pushing the country to conflict unnecessarily. The whole IEBC package was negotiated, passed through by consensus. Any changes to that law should be done by consensus. And now that I'm a stakeholder, widen the consensus, have more of us involved.
So will you be going before the Senate committee tomorrow as part of that process, widen the consensus? You can make your submissions there.
As of now, I would be happy to attend, but I think it is in good hands. I think those that were involved in the original negotiations can take it to its logical conclusion. And on that particular point, I should, unless it's part of another question, the solution to equipment failure to me is a parallel electronic system, and not fall back.
So what do you mean by that, a parallel electronic system? Could you explain?
Just like I'm sure in KTN here, you have a backup system in case everything shut down or one set of computers shut down. You would be up and running in a few minutes if you had to be. So if it's one thread or one line of computers providing you the backup, you can back it all up in such a way that not all collapses at the same time. Nothing, you mustn't forget that the last election continues to be, or the result continues to be controversial because of the idea that after the equipment failed, suddenly 2 million Kenyans were accounted for as having voted for only the president and no other candidate within the same general election. That raised the question.
Okay. One of our final questions as we come to the end of our conversation. This is what you had to say in an interview, the local daily, on tribalism and other parties. You said they have assumed a tribal dimension. Kenya is now divided into two, with one side made up of two communities, while the other has the remaining ethnic groups. You are from one of those communities. Why would anything be different with you? And if you're talking about these two sides that are so split right down the middle, you know, two communities on one end and the others on the other, why then would you and UDM want to be aligned with any rather than showing, you know, total independence from anything we have seen?
We are not aligned with the opposition in the sense of a political agenda.
How are you aligned?
We are in the opposition.
Okay.
So the term opposition applies to us, but we are not aligned to anything that they are doing except for the occasional agenda, like, for example, on IEBC laws and so on. So having said what you've just said, two are on one side and the rest on this, there's no community that is said to be totally neutral. So what you're looking for is an individual who packages himself, presents himself as independent of the tribal alignments and groupings that I consider will divide this country in a most destructive manner.
And in the same light, you said that UDM is ready to work with like-minded parties to, quote, salvage the country from falling further into despondency. What are some of these like-minded parties that UDM might be open to working with? As
of now, we're watching. We would like to see those that we truly, share views and so on. But as of now, we would rather stay independent of that. On the issue of despondency, I've been looking at the polls. 20% of the registered voters today think they will not vote for anybody. They will stay home. Those are the Kenyans we're thinking about. And the many millions who will have chosen not to register as voters, those are the same people who are saying, out of the choices they have, there is no one or no party they would like to vote for. We are coming into this space with an appeal to them. Please register, and please, nobody stays at home this time. Everybody votes for change. So on this second day of January 2017, you're assuring those undecided voters that your name will be on the ballot? Take that to the bank. We will. Thank you very much. That is Phillip Murgor, who's a presidential aspirant for the 2017 August general election. Are you convinced? Please keep your questions and comments coming in for him on this one. We thank you for your time. We hope we'll see a lot more of you here. Thank you, Yvonne, for letting me come here today. It is a privilege. I have previous association with KTN, and it's a station to watch.
Great,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Phillip Murgor. Please do let us know your views. They keep coming in. Monday Night News, that poll is still open, so keep your votes coming in. You're watching Monday Night News. We're taking a break. We have the day's business news when we return.